I feel like as long as the economy keeps wind in the sails, there are a lot of really quality projects that are going to move the needle for Jacksonville over the next 5-10 years.
This episode brought to you by Suites at Madison. Meeting and conference rooms for rent by the hour, week, month, or year. Suites at Madison, where business gets done. Check them out at www.downtowntampaoffice.com. Now, on to the show.
You are listening to the Invest Florida Real Estate Show, covering topics in lending, buy and sell strategies, property management, hot markets, and tips and tools to guide you along the way on your path to real estate success. You want Florida investment real estate talk? You have come to the right place. And now, our hosts, Eric Odom and Steven Silverman.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Invest Florida Real Estate Show. This is your co-host, Eric Odom, along with Steven Silverman. Steven, what is happening? Anything new?
Well, that's a question we ask ourselves every day because the market still goes up. It doesn't matter if there's war or what's going on. The market still increases. We see what's going on here on the west coast of Florida, but things are changing everywhere. Cap rates are going down, rents are going up. So today would be a good day to just segue across to the East Coast and see what's happening in the Jacksonville area.
Yeah, it's interesting. We're projected to have multiple Fed rate hike increases this year, and the intention is to tap the brakes a little bit on the market. Florida is it's as hot as I've ever seen it, Steven. And a lot of that has to do with the emergence from COVID, and folks that might have lived in areas that they felt a little trapped, decided that Florida, was a good place to come to, and seemed to really be liking single family homes and seemed to really be liking real estate investment. And so we've seen a lot of pressure on pricing, and it's going to be interesting to see. There's no question the old adage of don't fight the Fed, but Florida is probably going to be somewhat insulated from the similar effects that Fed rate hikes are going to have on the rest of the country because there's just so much demand here. Yeah, it will slow the market a little. That's the intent. But there's so much demand here and folks that are motivated besides just in investment purposes to look in the state. We had a nice email. We always like to, shout out to listeners who, write us or preferably they give us a review, Stephen. We love reviews.
Always like to get reviews, and those reviews really help us get more hosts that make our show more worthwhile. So please continue to help us with the reviews. And meantime, let's hear the review we got, Eric.
Well, Dave writes us and he says, "Hey guys, really love listening to your show. What about getting somebody from the Nature Coast?" Man, we'd love to get somebody from the Nature Coast. I just realized that we've never had anybody from the Nature Coast in Florida on the show. Dave, if you could point us in the right direction, brother. We'd love to have somebody who does investing in that area, talk a little bit about what's happening in the Nature Coast. And so if you've got anybody, you've got our email address, go to our website, go to our Facebook page, send us a message, and let us know that you've got somebody that might be able to talk about what's happening in your neck of the woods. We'd love to hear from them. So that's a great way for us to be able to get guests. Some of our best guests have come from our listeners. And it's hard to book our program, Stephen. It's, to keep it current and fresh and get relevant topics.
Well, we want good guests because that's what our listeners want. And it does. It's scheduling, it's missed calls, it's all those things, but getting the right guests makes it worthwhile for all of us.
Absolutely. Dave, appreciate that. Leaving us a 5-star review. Those are great. We'd like to read those out when we do get them. Is there anything else that we want to talk about, Stephen, before we roll into our guest?
Let's roll across the state. Today we have with us Ian Brown. Prior to founding Brown Brothers Realty, Ian was a senior consultant at a commercial real estate firm specializing in valuation and real estate analytics. In addition to being a licensed real estate broker, Ian is also a licensed appraiser, and he earned his law degree from Florida Coastal School of Law. Ian is well experienced in property valuation, highest and best use analysis, and tenant and landlord representation. Through his diverse and well-rounded experience, Ian applies his creative approach to assist clients reaching their investment goals. He is also an investor and owns an apartment complex. He's working on a storage deal and also converting offices to Airbnb. Ian, welcome to the Invest Florida Show.
Stephen, it is very good to be here. Thanks for having me.
No, Ian, really appreciate the time that you're investing with us today. Why don't you talk a little bit about how you ended up in this journey that you're on right now.
Certainly. So going back to probably undergrad, I went to Florida State, which I believe is a rival to you, Eric. But my time in Tallahassee, I think the very first moment I paid rent on my own, once I was an undergrad, I paid all my own living expenses. And I was bartending and waiting tables. And that first check that I handed over, I was like, I have got to get on the other side of this equation as soon as possible. Now, I didn't do it very quickly, but I kind of planted the seed before I was 20 years old that I ran the basic math of what this guy's mortgage should have been, what our rent was. And I didn't understand the analytics that I understand now, but I saw the margin, I saw the opportunity, and I knew that I was going to own rental income real estate in the future at some point. So Tallahassee, Florida, I was probably having too good of a time bartending, playing rugby, and I was actually a history major. So minimal math, not even an econ class. So my real estate training actually came after my first real job. My first real job was teaching high school, coaching football, coaching track, and great profession. I really enjoyed it, but a family friend pulled me aside and said, how would you like to learn commercial real estate? And I was like, well, of course, heck yes, let's go. And what he had us do, actually, myself and my younger brother, Adam, we went through all of the commercial real estate appraisal training all the way through certification. So I'm still a certified general appraiser today, but this is a while ago. This is back in maybe 07, 08. So I appraised in the previous cycle, before the fall of 08 downturn. And so I got about a year and a half of those go-go days, big non-recourse construction loans. I got a taste of everything, because when you do bank work, you really can't turn down per asset class. So I was doing a lot of hotels, apartments, some golf courses, and then all the normal stuff like office, industrial, retail, some land, and then like special purpose, strange things that are just tricky. Now, the beauty of it is I had a great mentor. His name's Eric Hector, and he's an MAI appraiser. We're still close today, but he's probably my first real mentor that brought me into real estate, taught me. I mean, I'm embarrassed to say I couldn't do anything in Excel. I didn't know how to organize folders like in a computer. So he really dusted me off professionally as an undergrad history major. And for about 3 to 5 years, we ran hard. I mean, hundreds of hotel appraisals, and I was driving all over the mid-Atlantic, all over Florida. I would drive from Jacksonville to Key West and back in a day sometimes. And we were I was underwriting, photographing, interviewing, pulling comps, running cash flows, doing lease abstracts, putting together reports, running to FedEx before the last cutoff, because we still turned in hard bound reports back then. And so it was phenomenal experience. And probably the core of my ability these days is really more from those appraisal days that I had in my mid to late 20s. Fast forward a little bit, downturn comes, fall of 08. Appraisal work, it didn't completely dry up, but it slowed down because there weren't transactions. So now you were doing like REO appraisals and updates on distressed bank loans. And so I did appraise in the downturn, but I decided to go to law school during that time. And so from about 2010 to 2013, I was in law school. I graduated in the spring of 2013. Passed the Florida bar, but it does take about 2 months to get your bar results. In that 2-month time period, I used my real estate license, which I had since I was a high school teacher, actually, just hadn't used it much. But I got with a group of young commercial guys in Jacksonville and started brokering investment real estate. And so by the time I got my bar results 2 months later, I had a few off-market hotel opportunities for sale, and I was putting together some deals, and I was starting to get the itch, kind of that deal junkie itch. And I did not start investing then. I wish I did. But from about 2013 until about 2016, I thought about it a lot. I helped my clients make a lot of money, whether it was legal or brokerage. And then in 2016, I kind of flipped the script there and figured I need to find a way to get into my own deals so I can one day pay off these massive loans that I've accumulated through all of this advanced degrees. I'll pause there for a second.
Yeah. I mean, it is one of those situations where a lot of our listeners and a lot of our guests bring up a bunch of debt in college, and that becomes a major barrier for them believing they can invest in real estate. when you pick up the pause, I think Stephen's got a question too. He's been sitting here biting his tongue.
I'm just sitting smiling, thinking to myself, because it just occurred to me that you're actually a member of 2 Florida bars, right? You said first you were a bartender and then you became a lawyer, so you're so you're really steeped in the bar scene in Florida.
Oh boy! When
exactly.
You laugh,
now I'm just more of a patron.
Yeah.
Yeah. Say when you laugh, Ian, you just encourage him. So just be careful.
I know. I got to be careful. No, I have 3 younger brothers, and I know how it can get. So I think what we're getting on here is just the accumulation of loans that I was fortunate, of course. My parents did help me a little bit in undergrad, but I paid all my own living expenses. But private law school is no joke. So came out with a little bit of a financial albatross around my neck and had to figure out what I'm going to do. So my education, my resume was better than ever, but my net worth was horrible. And by the time I serviced my own mortgage and paid my little office rent and paid my student loans, it was pretty meager. And I was running pretty hard and pretty fast and getting deals done, but I just really wasn't moving the needle. And I certainly wasn't even close to paying these loans down. Just as a quick anecdote for those that are listening that have the big loans, and then those that don't understand, the big student loans you can pay on what's called IBR. It's an income-based repayment. The problem is they'll let you make a payment that doesn't service the minimum interest. The idea being is you can stay in compliance and not default. But let's say then they base it on 10% of your take home. So 10% of your take home monthly income to service the debt. Well, I'll be totally candid. I think my minimum interest every year was like $15,000. So, a $500 or $600 a month payment. Let's say I was paying $6,000, $7,200 a year in interest. My loans were still growing $7,000, give or take a year. So 5 years goes by. I'm working really hard. I'm doing title and escrow and brokerage. I wasn't doing any appraisal at that point, but I was sitting as a special magistrate for the city of Jacksonville, hearing the tax appeals. So I was very busy and I had a good reputation, but little did anybody know I was going further and further into a hole, largely because of my student loan situation. So around 2016, like I said, I had helped a lot of clients make good money. I understood, or still understand, real estate value coming out of the appraisal profession. And I just decided to prospect multifamily and some single family with the same criteria that my clients would have. But if I found something really good, I just decided that, by God, I'm going to do it. I'm going to buy it. So it was really a mindset shift. And the first deal I did, again, I'm a pretty transparent guy. I think I had about $20,000 to my name. And I went into my zip code that I lived in. I knew that zip code obviously very well. I went into MLS. And this is 2016. I sorted that zip code, price per square foot, low to high. And I just looked at the very first things at the lowest price per square foot. And I stopped on the first one that wasn't total junk. And I drove it. It was commercially zoned, but it was built as a house. The agent was working for the bank because it was a foreclosed property. I don't even know if she'd been there. So I had some advantages there, and I knew I could buy it with some hard money. I could rehab it with like Home Depot and Lumber Liquidators and Lowe's credit cards and use a little bit of money I had. So was it risky? Yeah, but you have to start somewhere. So bought that little property, rehabbed it. And it ended up taking almost a year by the time I sold it. Again, I didn't know what I was doing. Made about $55,000 on that deal and did a 1031 exchange into a pocket listing that I had, which was an 8-unit apartment, concrete block, C-class. And that $55,000 was like the perfect equity to go on with a local credit union loan at a 80% loan to value. So picked up an 8-unit and rolled into that. And that was my first soiree into landlording. And I had voucher tenants, HUD, Section 8, learned how to work with the housing authority.
Oh, yeah.
So I was starting to build some acumen. I can pause there for a second, but the story goes on.
So essentially, you just bootstrapped it. So you didn't have any big investor that tagged along with you. You just grabbed your boots and jumped off.
Exactly. And I had clients that were, hotel owners. I had some pretty heavy hitting clients, but I think part of me was I wanted to do a deal where I knew I would learn a lot and I had total control. And so, that first deal, it was the purchase price was like $40,000. I mean, it was very, and I knew I could do that little deal myself. And so I stayed small and maintained total control until I had confidence in a track record. And then I did partner on a couple of deals going forward.
What year was that, Ian?
So the first one was 2016. And then I bought the 8 unit in the very beginning of 2018. And I guess we can jump right in. I bought a 28 unit right almost immediately thereafter. I was tracking both these deals at the same time. I wasn't sure if I could close them both, but I brought on a partner. I did the 8 unit alone with the 1031 exchange that I had from my little flip. And then I did the 28 unit. Same bank gave me the loan, but I brought on a partner. And both those deals were very good to me because they're C-class multifamily in Jacksonville in 2017 and 18. It was just a good time to buy them. And I knew they were good deals when I bought them. So now I was starting to get a track record for scale. I mean, it's not huge by a lot of your listeners' base, but I got up to where I had maybe 40 units in Jacksonville because I picked up another triplex from a wholesaler, and I was starting to get a little bit of a reputation for being able to do this. And the truth be told, I was just being resourceful and using the things that you learn as a broker, as an appraiser, and just asking a lot of questions. And I just wasn't afraid to look stupid. I was happy to ask the question if I could learn something and move forward. And then the pot of gold, if you will, came from me really building that reputation. And that was an 83 unit opportunity, multifamily 83 in Valdosta, Georgia. And a good friend of mine, who's my partner on the deal, we own that together. He found it off market. He knew it was good. He didn't want to sell it to a client. He wanted to buy it, but he didn't think he could do it alone for a variety of reasons. He didn't own any multifamily. He needed some help with everything. So I was a perfect partner. So we partnered up on that, and we still own that 83 unit. We rehabbed it. We just did a Fannie Freddie small balance loan refi this past summer. It's been a phenomenal asset for us. And what I'm doing now is I've got a couple Airbnbs. And I just closed on my most recent deal. I bought it on Valentine's Day this year, so just a month ago or so, depending on when this airs. It's a 4-unit office down in Atlantic Beach. And I'm converting it from office to short-term residential Airbnb style.
Oh, interesting.
And it's just a few blocks off the ocean.
Yeah, that's a good repurpose for some of these office buildings that are not in core areas. Even ones in the core areas are struggling. And if you can find a way to repurpose them, that's a great move.
Yeah, thank you.
And how are you running these? Are you self-managing or are you using property managers?
The large 83 unit deal that we held, we have full third-party management in Valdosta. They do a great job for us. They do such a good job that there's sometimes I forget we own it, which is a good thing. And so that property does really well. Now my local investments, I've either been property managing or a very hands-on asset manager, which depending on how you want to identify it. My low-income stuff with the HUD and Section 8, to be totally transparent, I didn't feel entirely safe going to all those properties. It's just what I could get into at that time in my life. And so I did have like a all-purpose kind of helper utility guy to get out there and help me with rent collection. Some people were still paying in cash, even though that's a horrible idea. But I did what I could, and I was still learning. But going forward, I'm moving towards nicer properties, higher price points, tenants that care about their credit, can give a big deposit, are fearful of an eviction. And I've had a lot better luck, and it's not that hard for me to run those properties.
Well, it sounds like you're going to shy away from Section 8 in the future then.
The answer is yes, Eric, but it's like somebody brought me an off-market, I think it was like 54 units, and it was one of these daisy chain off-market deals where it turns out it was actually already under contract, but it was presented like it was an off-market deal. And anyways, I almost jumped back into HUD and Section 8 world at 54 units here in Jacksonville. But, this may resonate with the audience, but the whole deal junkie mentality, if you see something with margins, it's so easy to downplay in your mind how much effort it's really going to be. Where as I look forward now, looking at a 5-acre yard that could be boat and RV storage. It needs some site clearing, but it's zoned for it. I'm starting to look at deals that are like the polar opposite on the managerial scale, where I know they can cash flow. They don't need much. Or if it's residential, I want it to have good margins. So that's why I've trended towards the Airbnb. Once I get these 4 offices converted, I'll have 6 down by the ocean in Neptune and Atlantic Beach, which is pretty good. Those are high price point. And then I have an Airbnb at my home because I house hack my primary residence.
So what areas in Jacksonville do you like?
Well, I don't like where I initially invested, but that's where I could find margin. So I kind of invested in the gun and knife club in the beginning, but I've kind of graduated towards Riverside. I work in San Marco. I would invest here if I found something. So Riverside, San Marco, and the beaches. So I'm in Neptune and Atlantic Beach with my investments, and I would do a deal in Jax Beach if it presented itself.
And you own Valdosta as well. Have you ventured outside of the Jackson area in the rest of the state or even outside of the state?
Other than Valdosta, I have not left the state for an investment. I do carry a Georgia broker's license. So here and there, I'll broker some investment real estate in Georgia, usually a motel or hotel. I still have a lot of contacts from when I was appraising hotels. So, but for the most part, I like to drive by things and call on them, or I don't send a lot of mailers, but I'll probably do more of what you would call driving for dollars without a super sophisticated approach. And I know a lot of people in Jacksonville because I was born here, and I've developed a little bit of a reputation as an investor or just a resource as a broker, attorney, appraiser guy. And so some people just call me with opportunities, or they might call me with a question or need help, and that might lead to an investment opportunity. So almost everything I've purchased has come through relationships.
So as a broker, attorney, investor, in all parts of Florida, we've seen dramatic changes lately. How have you seen the fundamentals change in Jacksonville area?
Well, Jacksonville has received a lot of like regional and national attention. And I was at a Biz Now conference 2 weeks ago, and one developer was quite candid. He said, with rental rates, we're talking about multifamily, but with rental rates going up, let's call it 20%, depending on what submarket, going up 20%, essentially 2 years in a row, and cap rates for like Class A new products sliding from 5 to 4 in some cases, it made a lot of deals pencil out. So you're seeing some developers that were not looking at Jacksonville now most definitely looking at Jacksonville. And I can tell you from sitting on planning commission and seeing all the rezones, PUDs, land use changes, there's thousands and thousands of units, both multifamily, single family, townhome. It's all on its way. It's already happening, but it's definitely on its way. So I'd say the evolution is we went from being kind of a large but somewhat overlooked MSA. When I sold my 28 unit, my 8 unit, and my 3 unit 2 years ago, I sold those, I think that's 39 or 40 units total. Those were South Florida investors that loved, they couldn't believe the pricing up here. I thought I was winning big time, and I really was. I believed I was, but for them, it was a steal. So fast forward a couple years, I'm not saying we're priced like Miami or Naples or Tampa, but we are starting to get some of that pressure as those investors look north to Jacksonville for some better yields.
What is the outlook for you? And what do you think about the Jax market, where it's headed, deal availability? What's the future look like? What's the crystal ball, Ian?
Well, we still have land in Jacksonville relative to like your Tampas and completely. So some of these markets, I don't know them as well as you, but we don't have to do a ton of infill projects. There's still plenty of infill projects happening, but there's also enough land to where we still have sprawling subdivisions going in within our beltway. Like we still have land to where we might have a 500 unit subdivision. There's still room for that. There's still multi-hundred acre tracts out there. There's actually some areas in Jacksonville we see come through for rezones that are thousands of acres. So I know that's unique to Northeast Florida because we're not as dense as other developed parts of Florida. So I see a lot of growth up here. I see our population. I think the Jacksonville MSA is roughly 1.2 million as an MSA. And depending on who you talk to, we're getting 30,000 people a year moving to Northeast Florida. So, that will quickly grow. And we do have the room for it. So some of these other metros, I'm not sure where the population growth is going to land, but I see a fair amount of people continuing to move to Jacksonville. A lot of our waterway, we're supposed to get a 4 Seasons built, which would be walkable to the Stadium District. The Landing, which is a waterfront development that got torn down a couple years ago, is getting redeveloped. So an invigoration of the waterways, a little more of a boating community. We'll see. So much of this has been rumored or attempted for decades. I was born here, but I feel like as long as the economy keeps wind in the sails, there are a lot of really quality projects that are going to move the needle for Jacksonville over the next 5-10 years.
Plus, another thing that Jacksonville has is you've got a deep water port over there, right? And now that the Panama Canal is taking the much wider ships, the economic infrastructure is building there.
We do. We have great infrastructure. We're a port city. We have, I-10 comes straight across, and then you have I-95 running up around the 295 Beltway. So, and we've got CSX is headquartered here. And so between the rail, the infrastructure, the port, we're definitely a city that competes as a logistics hub. We have Fortune 500 companies downtown. So we have a few things going on that I don't know that the average listener would be aware of.
Let's talk about your deal bogeys. Like, what are you looking for in a deal? I mean, you have a pretty diverse appetite for deals. You talk about apartments and single family and storage. And so, like, what are the bogeys that you look for, Ian?
So it's funny you say that because it probably sounds scattered to a lot of people, but coming from commercial real estate appraisal where you're just given a bid, you have to give a turnaround time and a fee, and you have to, sometimes you just have to figure it out. Maybe there's no comps, or maybe there's one comp from 3 years ago, or you got a funky project with like 12 storage units in a marina, and there's an RV spot over, a 3-unit strip center, and you get these weird appraisal assignments. And I didn't know it at the time, but it was training me to be more comfortable with like outside the box investment real estate. So I'm open to anything that gives me the yields that I'm looking for, as long as I can wrap my mind around it. And if I can understand the cash flows and I can find a way to support the cash flows with some type of comparables for my projections, it's probably a consideration or a green light for me. So I think to some investors, they're like, multifamily, that's all I do, or they want to Airbnb everything or build a single family portfolio. And I have no problem with that. I would do any of those deals, but I would also do surface storage. I would do interior corridor self-storage. I would do a hotel deal with a partner because that is a specialty. But I would bounce around a little bit if the yield made sense. And the further outside of my core competency, I'd probably bring in a strong partner.
Some of our listeners might wonder, listening to Ian, he's pretty well spoken and think that might come from strictly being a bartender or being an attorney. But this might probably be an opportunity to tell people you've got a podcast of your own that you just started too, right?
I do. So it's the Yield Coach is the platform I started just under a year ago. So pretty active on Instagram and Facebook, and podcast started. It's less than 6 months old, but the Yield Coach podcast is easy to find, and we do video recording as well. So that's actually what put me into, quite honestly, listening to more podcasts, thinking about, who I want to network with, who I want to meet, what we want to evolve to. And your platform is obviously super established. I have a lot of respect for it, and, a lot of gratitude for having me on your show. But yeah, that's the platform that I put out, largely because people were coming to me. It's funny because you go from being this timid little scared investor, or I'll speak for myself, and, buying this little $40,000, purple house that I'm going to, flip and move into my 8-unit. But as you get your momentum, people start to pay attention, and I wasn't beating my chest, but people started to come to me for advice. And that's where a lot of my future deals came from, was people coming to me with problems. And so I figured, this seems like a good opportunity to formalize the thought leadership, if you will, with some social media and a podcast.
So it's really discussing problems. Like, that's the focus of your podcast. You're discussing investor issues.
Mine tends to be a little more broadly entrepreneurial. So I will have some of the local business community on mine. I've only had 12 episodes, but we've had some novel investments that have done really well here. Brewhound it's a hybrid dog park bar, and it's just incredibly popular in Neptune Beach. And I did the brokerage and legal for that. And my close friend is the co-owner of it. So I had her on, and just these things that are moving the needle in kind of novel ways, because, my investment path hasn't been 100% traditional. So I tend to gravitate towards people that are, trying new things and finding yield in somewhat novel ways.
So Ian, if people want to reach you and learn a little bit more, maybe they, it's not easy to every day find someone who's an appraiser and a real estate broker and an attorney and a bartender, and they could have a real need for your services. How can they reach you?
Now, a video podcaster.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, Steven's family has asked me a long time ago to make sure that he sticks with no video because his face is best suited for radio. That's correct. That's correct. So
yeah, you got to know your strengths, right?
That's right.
Yeah, the easiest way to find me, we're probably the most forward facing with the Instagram and Facebook. You could message us there. Yield-Coach is a website that I have, but it's, still kind of in its infancy. I do see, in full transparency, I do see an opportunity in the future, maybe for like a Yield Coach Capital, where we, some people might want to invest along in deals that are just a little too big for me to do by myself or with a partner, but that's kind of a to be determined. But I think it's going to be a lot of fun, and I've enjoyed, kind of networking in this thought leadership world.
Awesome. Ian, really appreciate the time that you invested with us today. Stephen, anything else before we let Ian go?
Ian, thank you very much, and we'll see you in Jacksonville.
Awesome. Please do. All right, Eric and Stephen, I enjoyed it.
And that was Ian Brown talking real estate in Jacksonville and getting started, Stephen, really when it looks pretty bleak, right? I mean, a lot of people held back by student debt. It's a common theme that we hear from intro investors, and Ian kind of worked through that.
So Ian put boots on the ground. He has related skills, whether, it's an attorney relating to a real estate broker and relating to an appraiser. Of course, I'll throw in the bartending work too, because that goes with anything. But I think they all gel together, and with boots on the ground, he's building something there.
Yeah, you have to be able to form relationships. And, I was a bartender for a while too, Stephen. I probably don't have as good of a personality as Ian, but I know that helps. Get you in front of people, and it teaches you to form those relationships. And, this is a relationship business. You got to be a person who can get people to like you, which is kind of hard for me, but.
You know what? I think you're just making an excuse for how your bartending evolved.
Into what I'm doing right now, I don't even know. Great, Stephen. So Ian was a great guest talking about Jacksonville. We always love to have folks in the northeast of the state talk about what's going on there. It certainly is. We talk about it being the I-4 corridor, and then several years ago we heard somebody refer to it as the I-4 triangle, and I said, "What is that?" And he goes, "Well, it's Jacksonville. You can't really leave Jacksonville out." And I'm like, "Well, what's in the middle there?" It's like, "Well, of course. Villages. How can you leave all this stuff out? There's so much growth happening. I-4 corridor north up to Jacks, and certainly the Village is another area that's just exploding." So, we love to hear about one of the corners of the I-4 triangle. Stephen, Ian was a great guest. Where else can we hear great guests?
The place to go is to our website, www.investfloridashow.com. You can go through our archives, and we're going back a lot of years now. Also, download the apps and listen while you're mobile. You can listen in the gym or while you're driving. Lots of great stuff in there.
Guys, as always, we appreciate the time that you invest with us each and every episode. And until next time, hasta la vista.
You've just listened to the Invest Florida podcast with Eric Odom and Stephen Silverman. Join us every week for actionable real estate investment ideas, and of course, visit our website at www.investfloridashow.com for more shows and tips on how to earn a cash flow in the real estate market in Florida. While hosts and producers of the Invest Florida show have no reason to doubt the validity of comments of our guests, we do not warranty their accuracy. Please check with your legal, financial, and tax advisors before entering into any investment. Returns will vary from person to person and deal to deal based on unique circumstances. All information expressed in this show is for educational purposes only. Opinions of the guests are not necessarily shared by the hosts and producers of the Invest Florida show.